When you combine all the diseases of the brain into the total economic burden on this country every single year, it comes to over $1 trillion a year we spend. One Mind for Research is an organization that wants to become the American Heart Association for all the diseases and injuries of the brain. I think what's different about One Mind is we're trying to unify all the different advocacy groups that have been created around all these diseases. But when we look at the diseases of the brain, we categorize them as single diseases, such as Alzheimer's, such as dementia, such as autism, when in reality they all emanate from the brain. And that's how we should be thinking of them. But we know today, or at least science is helping us understand today, that if you take the diseases of post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, dementia, Alzheimer's, even Parkinson's and ALS, there are many researchers that will make the argument that they are in fact all connected. Yet people who are researching Alzheimer's don't even know what everybody who's researching Alzheimer's is doing, because individual researchers maintain the data that they, in fact, gather as intellectual property. So it is a field that is ripe for change, particularly in a world of big data. One Mind believes that data should be accessible to all. Let me give you an example. The Michael J. Fox Foundation funds research into Parkinson's disease. About $55 million a year. Very, very successful organization that's doing wonderful things. But they could be so much more efficient in how they spent that $55 million if they knew what everybody else was doing in the area of Parkinson's disease. And they don't, because researchers don't make their research available for everyone to see until it shows up in a refereed journal article, let alone see the research that's going on in diseases that are on the left side and the right side of Parkinson's disease. So what we want to do, One Mind, is create a portal, an information portal, where the data from the research that we fund is sent to that portal and available for all researchers to data mine. And when they data mine that research and that data, we know that they can come up with disease models, and those disease models lead to better diagnostics, better patient outcomes, and in some cases maybe even cures. We feel, One Mind feels, that this is just an absolutely critical change we need to make in the way we do basic research in this country so that we can in fact understand these diseases. Because the researcher who's doing research in Alzheimer's may find a key for the researcher who's working in dementia or traumatic brain injury or Lou Gehrig's disease. So it just makes sense to change the business model and find a way that we can in fact make this data available for all to mine. When you combine all the diseases of the brain into the total economic burden on this country every single year, you take all the Alzheimer's, the autisms, all of them, and you combine them, it comes to over $1 trillion a year we spend. And that's why One Mind's mission is so absolutely critical. We are solely focused on one thing, and that's doing research. Not research for research's sake, not basic research just to do basic research, but basic research that we translate into better diagnostics and better treatments and hopefully cures for these diseases that are such a huge burden on this country and in the entire world. And you know, as we go around and leave the confines of the United States, there's a tendency at times to believe that these are only injuries that Americans experience. That's not the case. The European Union has done a similar study into the total cost in the European Union, and it's $1 trillion in the European Union. So you take Europe and the United States, you combine them together, spending $2 trillion a year on the diseases of the brain. Now let's put the spotlight on China. Go to a developing country where you have a much higher use of bicycles. Go to a developing country where you may not have the same laws for people who are driving in the street, and you combine a huge number of bicycles and cars of individuals who may not be the best drivers in the world, and you have a huge number of individuals with TBI, traumatic brain injury. You know, it's not just soldiers that have TBI. One of the most interesting things to me was I went to see our lead investigator, a guy named Dr. Jeff Manley, who took me to his ward at San Francisco General Hospital on a Monday. And on both Saturday and Sunday, they had 20 individuals that came into their emergency room that had to have CT and MRI scans who had suffered some kind of traumatic brain injury. That's amazing to me. And none of these were veterans. None of these were soldiers off the battlefield. These were all individuals in their part of San Francisco who came to the emergency room with some kind of head trauma. 1.7 million Americans every single year suffer head trauma. It is one of the leading causes of death and injury in this country, according to the CDC. That we don't know more about it, that we don't know more how to treat it or to diagnose it, to me, is a sad state of affairs. And that's why One Mind is totally focused. That's our sweet spot at trying to use private philanthropy to ramp up research into these horrible, horrible, horrible injuries and diseases. I'm General Pete Chiarelli, and I'm commanding you to subscribe to THNKR.